All right, so I'm going to get us started. It's 4:02. That's been my my norm starting point, and my other norm, just FYI, is ending early. I don't expect to break that pattern today either. But thank you for setting aside an hour or so of your time today. Thank you to your JCCs for being in benchmarking this round and for the work that you've agreed to add to what was already too much work to get done. I'm looking at a seasoned group of professionals, everyone who knows benchmarking. Let me do a share screen and show you what we're going to cover on this call. So I've left in the deck, just really as reference, some general slides about benchmarking and some general slides about priority action items and the online dashboards. We're gonna flash through that. It's really just to create the right mental set that this is not about collecting a lot of data. This is about taking those data and using them and making changes at your JCCs. We're gonna go through that pretty quickly. We will then move into a reminder of the procedures and use of OneHub. We'll cover some of the changes that we've made this year from 2 years ago. Not an enormous number of changes, so that's not going to take a lot of time either. We'll review deadlines and we'll end up with a summary of the calendar for the next couple of months. Please unmute yourself at any point with questions. If I'm not being clear, or if something I say raises a related question, just shout it out. No need to wait till we get to the end. So here's that quick introduction. Reminder, benchmarking is a 2-year process. We are starting in A year, which means we're doing all of the data collection. So A year is when we have the largest data Excel files, and when we do all the surveys. It's also the part of benchmarking where we offer to come to your JCC next spring to work with your staff and with your lay leadership around these data and thinking about how to put them to use. So that's where we are in the sort of cycle of benchmarking. And you've probably seen this slide in the past. It just lays out in more detail the A year, which is when we're doing the heavy data collection, as opposed to the B year, which is largely us leaving you alone to work on your priority action items, to work on the opportunities that you've identified from the data that we're going to collect over the next couple of months. And the reminder, what's important about benchmarking is not collecting the data. It's not populating the pretty online dashboards that allow you to manipulate the data. It's actually putting it to use. It's the what now. A reminder before we even start that that's where we're headed. And as we begin sending interim data reports from the surveys, keep in mind, is there anything that's jumping out that calls for action? I'm always pleased, never surprised when we get to the benchmarking consultation and the JCC says, we started 2 months ago working on A, B, and C because we saw in the staff survey, we saw in the user survey, or there was an issue that came out of our board report, or even as we were completing the participation tool, the financial accounting tool, we noticed something that we hadn't realized up to this point. So you don't need to wait for us to come to your community to begin to take action. And a quick review of what you can expect from us. In addition to support during the next 2 months, response to questions, making sure you've got all the tools you need to be successful. We will be sending in October or November summary reports from the user survey and from the board survey, as well as the open-ended comments. Our goal is by the end of December or very early January to have all these data available to you on the online dashboards. So we're working to get the data turned around very quickly. We will again be creating a very short file of data highlights, just a few pages of the most important metrics in each of the areas of benchmarking, and then drive towards February, March, April, May, when the benchmarking faculty will be traveling Canada and the United States, working with groups around their results and helping to turn them into action. That's the deliverables from our end. I assume you've all seen the dashboards, so I don't think we need to spend much time talking about them or looking at them. Again, data going all the way back to 2012, whatever of those years you participated. So 2023 at JCC can say what's happened in the last 10 years. It may only be interesting, but I would be interested to see a 10-year trajectory of membership, of camp, of early childhood, of different parts, aspects of your operations. You can use our standard peer groups. You can create your own peer groups. You can drill down into the data. You can filter and look at certain segments of users or certain segments of staff. Again, you could always click on a peer group bar and see the 5 JCCs with the strongest results in an area where you're struggling. Who are the JCCs you may want to talk to for suggestions in a given area? This is just a sample staff slide, and of course, those heat maps that show you pictorially for a given question. What are the differences by this case, by department, by full-time versus part-time, by reporting level, and so forth. So all that is really just a reminder and a tease that the pain and suffering of getting the data submitted over the next period of time hopefully will be more than met when you actually get the results and are able to use it to celebrate the things that are going well and identify areas, good or bad, where there's an opportunity for growth. That's my very quick overview of benchmarking. And with that, we will now segue into the nuts and bolts of today's call. There are 50 JCCs participating this year, which is great. We had a dip in 2021 because of the pandemic, but this is one of the largest numbers of JCCs we've ever had in benchmarking in a given year. So 50 JCCs from 53 locations, 4 JCCs participating for the first time. You can see them highlighted or bolded: East Bay, Montreal, Newport News, that's the Virginia Peninsula JCC, and the Mid-Island Y in Plainfield, New York, all participating in benchmarking for the very first time, which is one of the things I enjoy the most. You are in good company, and with that, how does this work? Quick reminder. So OneHub is our file sharing site. If you had credentials from previous years, they're still in force. Your username is your work email address, password, whatever you selected as your password, and you can update your password if you can't remember what it is. Probably the most important reminder for people who haven't been on OneHub in a year or two or more is that when you begin uploading your completed files or your email lists, your logos, your membership structure, be sure that you navigate into your folder, that you actually click on the folder that says Columbus as opposed to the home level where you see, which is called JCC files, and then there's a folder of Columbus underneath it. Click into your folder, and that ensures that the only people who can see your files are staff from your JCC that have been authorized to be on OneHub and the benchmarking team. So as long as you do that, it's a secure site. We regularly review their data privacy and security capabilities, and we're confident that the data coming through OneHub is secure. And of course, OneHub is also where you'll get things from us. So we already have on OneHub the 2023 participation tool and financial accounting tool. They've been finalized. They're ready for you to download and start working on. We have on OneHub all of the surveys except for the user survey. User survey will be up this week, but we're just making it the final last couple of tweaks to that. So those surveys are there. Copy of this orientation presentation is on OneHub. The sample, the standard invitation letter for the user survey is there. So anything you should need from JCC Association to do your benchmarking work will be on OneHub, and almost all of it is already there, populated for your use. A page that may look a little bit different only because we added more detail this year. The welcome page, the first tab of OneHub, you'll see there are actually 12 things listed. We were deciding it would be helpful to be more inclusive from item 1, which is a request that we made to your execs a week and a half or 2 weeks ago to complete a short survey that told us who's on the benchmarking team, what's their email address and their phone number, that gave us the names of any off-site early childhood locations for your JCC, and told us when you'd prefer to have your user survey take place. We have 9 survey windows, and this survey was to give us your preferences regarding those 9 2-week options. So that's been out a couple of weeks, but everything else we're looking for, and all of the deadlines that we've set for the completion of files, for the submission of emails, for you name it, is here. So this is just a very quick one stop. What's going on? Where are we in the process? What's coming up? Are there deadlines that I need to be on top of that I should be working on? So that's just a tool for you. The only other page of OneHub that I wanted to share with you is the contact information and survey dates. Wanted to let you know that first link is the survey I just talked about. It's that benchmarking team contacts and survey preferences survey. The second link, and I will send out an email reminding JCCs about this. The second link is for JCCs to tell us they're interested in participating in the leading edge staff survey in October. I'll cover it in a little more detail when we get to that section, but basically, if your JCC did not participate in the leading edge survey in April, then we need you to complete the survey. It's the same questions, but Leading Edge is offering it again for benchmarking JCCs in October. So that's one option. If you didn't take it in April, we want your JCC to take it now, because we're not doing a separate staff survey this year. We're relying on the Leading Edge data. Second option, just to think about, if you weren't happy with your response rates in April, I did a quick peek, and it looks like the JCCs on this call actually had pretty remarkable response rates, 40%, 50%. There was even one who had a 75% response rate. That's awesome. Those JCCs are done with the staff survey. Nothing to worry about. That piece you can check off your list. But there were some JCCs that had really low response rates, 15%, 20%, partly because of survey fatigue, partly because of the continuing effects of pandemic and hybrid, and partly because I think they invited too many people to participate in the survey. We learned afterwards that there were JCCs that invited every lifeguard, every person who came in and taught a class for an hour a week. At some JCCs was invited to take the staff survey. Some JCCs invited their summer camp counselors. Not surprisingly, those folks were unlikely and very, in relatively rare occasions, to complete the survey. That hurt the response rate. So we're going to work with any JCC that signs up again for October to make sure you're including the right people, the people who really can provide informed opinions about the work experience at your JCC. And of course, we can help with tips on how to nag them and encourage them to participate this round. So we've covered OneHub. Let's talk about some general reminders, and then we'll actually look at the 6 tools. We'll do that fairly quickly. In terms of general reminders, I always begin presentations, these orientations, by reminding staff that the earlier you start, the less frustrating this work will be. It's not necessarily hard, but it's time consuming. And there are lots of different folks on staff who participate by providing different pieces of data. If you wait till the last second, you can get it done. It's just a lot harder. So encourage you to begin early, figure out who's going to be able to help you with which piece of benchmarking data collection. Let them know, give them plenty of notice on what they need to get done and what their deadline is. And that'll just make everything run more smoothly. What else is jumping out at me? When we've talked a little bit about this already with the leading edge staff survey, but the magic of a strong response rate, I believe, is what happens locally, what the JCC does, how you remind people and encourage people to participate in those surveys. And frankly, today, it's how many times you remind them and in how many different ways you remind them. That's what it takes to really penetrate through all the noise and the dozens of surveys and the hundreds of emails that are plowing into people's inboxes. So think about with your marketing team and other colleagues, what are the strategies you can use to have a great response rate on the user and staff survey if you take it again. And lastly, we have a couple optional things around the user survey. I think they're addressed again later, but you have the option to customize the invitation email. You have the option to add a few custom questions, things that your JCC has particular interest in exploring. And you have the option of providing a JCC incentive. This is just one, they should be modest, but they're a way of saying, we want your input so much that we're going to offer, through a drawing, a gift certificate or some J-Bucks or whatever makes sense to your JCC. So if that makes sense, please work with us in figuring out how to do that and how to make sure your survey recipients know about those options. And so that takes us to the first survey tool, the tool with the earliest submission deadline, and that's the board practices survey. The board practices survey is completed by the JCC, a series of operational questions about how your board is structured and operates. And the way we will share that survey with you is through an email and a survey link sent to your executive director on September 6th. and that survey deadline is September the 22nd. That's, again, the earliest deadline. You can begin planning on that. Please let your exec know that that invite is coming and they should be on the lookout for it. If they don't see it in their inbox, they should be checking spam folders. If they still can't find it, they should reach out, or you should reach out to us for help. The board practices survey, because it's relatively short, has to be completed in one sitting. You can't complete half and save your work and then come back and do the other half. So it's the one survey where we encourage you to download from OneHub a PDF of the survey questions, share them with whoever is going to be completing the board practices survey, so that they can make sure they're ready to answer all the questions when they click on the survey link. There are a few things that require some advanced work, average board meeting attendance, giving by board members. So that's the strategy we recommend. Of course, with this tool or any of the tools, if you have questions or problems, JCC benchmark@jcca.org is the best email address. That's really our help desk email address. A reminder that there are two definitions we use in the governance tools for the board member survey and for the board practices survey. So I wanted to go through that again before you started those tools. The most important is, who is a board member? Because we want the board practices survey to reflect your active board membership, and we want the board member survey to be completed by those people who are most active with your board. We're asking you to only include board members who have a vote, who are not honorary, and who are either elected or appointed by the president. So when you start calculating attendance or giving or turnover on your board, do it only for that smaller group of people, not for the dozens of life board members that may be on the back of your letterhead but aren't attending meetings, aren't voting members, don't have the same connection with the JCC today as your active board members do. And also, when you complete the board practices survey, we're going to ask you a few questions about over the last year. Please, when you answer those questions, base it on your board year, which we're defining it as the point where new board members roll on. So it's not January 1st, although it may be January 1st. It's not your fiscal year. It's that point in the year when your new slate of officers and board members begin their service. Could be based on your annual meeting, could be based on your bylaws, but just use that date whenever we talk about the board year to define when a board year starts and when your last completed board year ended. So that's our first governance tool. This is just a screenshot of some of the questions we ask on the board practices survey. Policies and procedures. What do you provide board members? Do the board members have term limits? As I said, giving, average attendance, how many board members rolled off? So a series of questions about the board completed by the JCC. The second governance tool is the board member survey. Again, we're using that definition of who is a board member to decide which email addresses you submit to JCC Association, which email addresses you upload to OneHub for that survey. Like the board practices survey, this is not customizable. The same survey and the same email invitation is used for all 50 JCCs, and it's being sent out a little bit later. So you see the dates there. It's being sent on September 27th, when most of the Jewish holidays are over, and board members will have until October 13th to complete the board member survey. The last thing that I want, the last two things I want to emphasize in point number 5 here, please make sure your board members understand that they're going to receive two surveys. They'll receive a survey as a member of the JCC and a very different survey as a member of the board of directors. And that's caused some confusion in the past. So it's important to let them know that those surveys are very different and that you hope they will complete both of them. And the second point is we have a really high bar for what we think is a good response rate for the board survey. Historically, the user survey average response rate has been in the 10 to 15% range. For the user survey, it's more like 45 to 50. But for the board member survey, your most committed, engaged leaders, we're setting a floor of 80%. And the average last round was 88%, with 15 JCCs having a 100% response rate from their board members. So keep that in mind as you figure out what it's going to take to let board members know the survey is coming and to encourage them to complete the survey. We will actually provide you with detailed information while the board member survey is open. We will email the JCC and say, Jerome, these are the 7 email addresses of board members who haven't completed the survey yet. Please follow up with these 7 people. So we'll be that specific, and with your help, we hope and expect that we'll again be in the 80% plus response rate range for the board member survey. So those are our first two tools: the board practices survey, the board member survey. The third deadline is for the participation tool. This is a spreadsheet, a workbook that, as you recall, asks for membership data and programmatic data for core programs, for early childhood, for day camp, for after school program. Just a reminder, because you haven't hopefully looked at it in at least a year. Please start with the instruction tabs. The instructions are there because we've learned over time what kinds of errors or what kinds of clarity gives us the best result, the most consistent and clean data from JCC. So please don't skip the instruction tab because you feel like I know how to do this. Start with the instruction tab, which is also where you identify your JCC. So there's that drop-down menu where you tell us that you're the Miles Nadal JCC or the Austin JCC. There are optional note boxes on each of the tabs. They are exactly that, optional. If there's information you want to share with us so that we'll be aware of something as we're reviewing your data, why did you leave a question blank? Why was there such a big swing from last round to this round in a certain number? You can use those boxes, and you can also use them to write yourself reminders, so that 2 years from now, you'll remember how you approached a particularly tricky issue with your data. And of course, you only need to complete the turquoise cells. So you'll see lots of busy pages with lots of directions and calculated cells, but the number of data points we need are relatively small on each page. Pittsburgh is the only JCC on this call that needs to worry about multiple sites. Pittsburgh, because it has two locations with full fitness facilities. So Pittsburgh has a slightly bigger lift. They'll complete a participation tool for each site and a financial accounting tool for each site. The rest of you can ignore multi-site tools. And lastly, the last tab of the participation tool, as well as the financial accounting tool, has some sign-offs on the participation tool, it's your membership director and your executive director that we want to have reviewed the form before you submit it. And so there's just a yes, no drop down to confirm that that's happened. Quickly looking at the data tabs in the participation tool, you can see that on the instructions tab, there are just those two data points. Drop down to say which JCC this report is for, and a second cell that says no, this is not part of a multi-site submission, or for Pittsburgh to say yes, this is part of a multi-site submission. That's our first tab. The youth program tabs, tab A, is asking for your retention results, retention of preschool kids who didn't graduate a year ago. How many of them were re-enrolled in your preschool this September? Similar questions on the next tab around day campers in 2020, summer of 2022. How many of those returned in summer 2023? We asked some questions about teacher retention and about participation in our Sheva Center, and some questions about the after-school program that your JCC may be running. That's tab A. Tab B is early childhood, and just to remind you, we're looking at we're trying to do an analysis classroom by classroom for your preschool program. The table on the left is asking about capacity. What's the maximum number of children that you can serve in room 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. For Monday through Friday morning, a session, we don't define morning as ending at 12 or 12:30 or 1, but a morning session Monday through Friday and an afternoon session Monday through Friday. What's your capacity, maximum number of kids you can serve? The table on the right is then for those same rooms, what was the average enrollment? Both of these tables should be completed based on last year, the 2022-23 school year. So a complete year of preschool. We have made one change in this tab this year, and that's highlighted by the arrow. We've added an age range. We think it may be helpful for JCCs and for JCC Association to be able to look at capacity and enrollment figures by age group, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. We've heard from a number of JCCs about the public schools that have been expanding their pre-K and K programs, and how that's affected their programs. This will allow us to look at that a little more deeply. You'll see that the instructions say, base your answer to the age group on the morning ages, the morning classroom. So if for some reason, let's say in the afternoon, you combine the 3s and 4s into a single classroom, base your age just on who was in that room during the morning sessions. Hopefully that's clear. That'll be easy to complete, and we'll see if the data is useful. But it's
quick question.
Sure.
Let's say we have, because I know this is for a fact, I'm going to get this question. We have 18 months to 36 month room, so 1.5 to 3. Which one would we pick?
So we tried to anticipate and give some broad ranges. So there, I don't have it in front of me, but there's probably a 2-year-old range and a 3-year-old range and a 2/3 as a different option.
Okay.
So we've tried to anticipate that, and the directions say pick the one that fits best.
Okay.
That covers the greatest number of the kids in the room.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but I'm not surprised that every combination you could think of as we talk to our colleagues seems to be the norm is that there is no norm. It just depends on your community and who you're serving and how it makes sense to structure that. So it's a great question. So that's the tab B. Tab C, a reminder, we're looking at your success in moving children from one program area to another. So kids who graduated from early childhood, your success in then getting them into camp the next summer, or getting them into a school year activity, whether it's an after-school program, a dance class, a swim team, any kind of school year program. And in between, the second section is about campers, kids who are in camp summer 2022, and how many of those specific kids participated in any kind of JCC activity during the following school year. So it's, it's to help look at the stickiness of the JCC, particularly for these critical age groups and these critical programs. So that's tab C. Tab D, the conversion tab. Again, this is just a refresher. We ask about tours given by the JCC, any kind of tour. It could be, it could start with the preschool, it could start with fitness, it could start with camp, any tours given to people, and how many of those tours result in someone joining as a member of the JCC. The other questions on this tab talk about children of members, the right age for preschool, and children of members, the right age for your day camp program. How many of them actually enrolled in your preschool or enrolled in your preschool program? In both cases, we're talking about excluding preschool camp. We're really talking about your normal K plus camping program. So tab D is about conversion. And the final data tab is the membership tab. Each month, how many joins, how many drops in membership units, and then a question at the bottom about retention. We calculate annual membership retention using this cell at the bottom. How many of the units on the first day of your year were still members on the last day of the year? The only change on this tab, and it's totally cosmetic, was highlighting this one cell to say fill in C13, right? C13, which says what's the first month of your most recently completed fiscal year. That data is important because it defines how we want these data submitted. We want them to match your fiscal year. And we've had a few cases in the past where a JCC missed that part of the directions. So it's now red, and once you fill in that, it will automatically complete the headings, and that should serve as a good guide for how to complete the rest of the membership tab. So it's just to avoid possible errors in picking the wrong months. And the participation tool ends with just a handful of validation checks. These are provided in part so that you can catch mistakes before you submit your form. There are also things that we, of course, review as part of our validation of every participation tool. After all the data has been collected and entered into the participation tool, take a look at the validation tab, see if any of these checks look off and cause you to go back and look at the numbers. And if not, make sure the membership director and the exec have reviewed your data, use the drop downs to confirm that, and you're ready to upload the participation tool to OneHub. And as I mentioned, the big change this year was simply adding that age range for the early childhood room data. We dropped all the pandemic guidance that we added in 2021. We didn't think it was needed this year. And otherwise, the participation tool is pretty similar to what it's been in prior years. So quick pause for questions on the participation tool. Okay, I will keep going. The user survey, as well as the two governance surveys are delivered through the Alchemer survey platform. We've been using it since 2017. We continue to be happy with both its functionality and the security that this site provides. The fact that these surveys can be taken on a desktop, on a laptop, even on a cell phone, we think is an advantage. So we will be continuing to use that platform, and the email from the invite will have a from that says JCC survey at jcca.org in case you get asked. It was more of an issue when we were doing the staff survey from Alchemer, which because it allowed you to whitelist those email addresses. Less critical with the user survey that's going out to the world. As I mentioned earlier, we've already asked for your preference about survey dates. I didn't mention, I don't think, that once again we are encouraging and welcoming JCC's adding 3 to 5 custom questions at the end of the survey. Totally optional, but if there are burning issues that have come up at your JCC programs or renovations or issues that you want some feedback on that we're not already covering with the user survey, this is an easy way to get that feedback. And so just let us know in the survey that you're interested in custom surveys. We'll follow up. I'm glad to work with you in crafting those questions. And when we customize your survey, we will add those custom questions to your custom survey. A few reminders. We are encouraging you to be as inclusive as you can in the people you invite to take your user survey. Members, of course, but we know in most JCCs, maybe all JCCs, there are lots of programs that someone can participate in without being a member, and we want to capture those people as well. We want their feedback as well. Anyone who has had an interaction with the JCC in the past year or so, for whom you have an email address, we'd encourage you to include them in the invites. That also means that if there are multiple adults in a household and you have separate email addresses for them, that you include those as well. One person may be active in the fitness area, one person in arts and culture. We'd love to get the feedback from both of them. But no kids, no one under age 16. Try to send us the cleanest possible list so there aren't a lot of bounces. And be sure to remove anyone who has asked you to not send JCC emails to them. So we don't aggravate your people. The surveys won't begin until October 3rd. So if we have opportunities to collect additional email addresses, please do so. But we'll also be giving you a generic survey link that you can post on your website, and you can include in social media and in other publicity about the survey. So even if you don't have an email address, someone who's been engaged with the JCC will have an ability to complete the survey as long as they hear about it, and they can access either the link we email to them or that generic link. And just in terms of timing, so we are hoping to hear back from all the JCCs this week about survey preferences and to confirm to you next week which dates have been assigned to your JCC. Once you have those dates, count back 2 weeks. We're asking that at least 2 weeks before your survey launch, you've sent us the email addresses, you've sent us custom questions if you're interested in adding questions, and you've sent us custom email invite language if you decide you want to customize that invite. So 2 weeks from whenever your survey begins. And this is just a reminder of what that invitation looks like, obviously without the boxes, but it's standard language that we've developed that we think generates a pretty successful response rate. We will customize the things that are red. We'll customize, so we will put the right name of your JCC and the right names for your board chair and title and your exec and title, and when your survey closes. That will do automatically. But if you want to change any of this language, or if you want to add an incentive, a JCC provided incentive, you do that just by downloading this template, this Word document from OneHub, making your changes, and then uploading it into your folder so that we know there's some changes that we need to integrate into your survey invite. In terms of changes to the user survey, we generally work very hard to keep consistency from year to year. So we do have the ability to compare longitudinally, but we make a small number of changes. And the big changes for 2023 are, again, eliminating the pandemic references that we introduced last round. And we've done some additional work thinking about, with some input from colleagues in the field, the Jewish impact part of our user survey. What are the questions we ask to try to get a handle for how JCCs are impacting their members, and what may be the drivers of that impact. So you'll see when you look at the survey, there are a couple more questions and some slight text revisions to the old questions. And number 4, we've added a new question. In the past, we simply said, are you or do you or any member of your household consider yourself Jewish? This year, if they say yes, we have a follow-up question that says, please check all the people that involves. It can be you, could be a spouse or partner, can be dependents, or can be other adults. And we think that's going to help us analyze the Jewish impact questions and understand better the composition of the folks who are using our JCCs. So those are the only big changes in the user survey. So we've now covered 4 of the 6 tools. The staff engagement survey, as I mentioned earlier, is the leading edge EES, the leading edge employee experience survey. We will have all of the data for benchmarking JCCs from April, May, unless JCCs decide to redo the survey in October, in which case we will be using the October data. It will replace, we don't have the ability, leading edge doesn't have the ability to add the 2 data files together. So if you decide to retake the survey in October, that will be the data that we use for benchmarking. The survey is October 10th through the 25th. Again, I talked about who we think you should be inviting to take that survey, and some of the factors that help the JCCs have found helpful in encouraging staff participation. Here are the dates for the leading edge staff survey. So by September 13th, we want you to let us know that you're interested. And there's a short survey that asks, are you interested? If you are, which staff should receive response rate reports while the survey is open? And lastly, which staff should have access to the data when the results are finalized? So that's number 1. By September 13th, we need to know that you're interested. By September 28th, you need to upload your HRIS data to Leading Edge. And we provided that box URL on the OneHub site, as well as in this presentation. It needs to include, so we're requiring first name, last name, work email address, birth date, start date, and the JCC name. But JCCs also have the ability to add some custom fields, and that can be incredibly useful in the analysis of your results. So once we know who's participating, we're going to offer a Zoom call to talk about the HRIS and strategies for success with that, so that you can get that uploaded by the 28th of September. As I said, the survey is October 10th through the 25th, and Leading Edge has told us that they'll have your data on their portal by November 8th. So you'll see the results of that survey very, very quickly. We're glad to be helpful with that survey for those who participate. There are also lots of resources on the Leading Edge survey. There's a link to their website. There's the email address with any questions you have now or when your survey is over. And we expect maybe a third of the JCCs will be participating in this survey in October. Last tool, everyone's favorite, the financial accounting tool. As you may remember, there are 12 tabs, 12 data tabs on the financial accounting tool. So it is a lot of data in a lot of different areas that we're collecting. Please remember those 3 points in red at the top. Please remember that there are macros in the FAT. So most JCCs, when you open it, you'll get a warning asking you if you want to enable content, and you need to say yes. You need to enable the macros so that the tool will work properly. You need to be sure to save the FAT as a .xlsm file to maintain those macros. And finally, if you or your accounting colleagues are copying data from another spreadsheet into the financial accounting tool, it's very important that they, instead of just say copy and paste, that they copy, paste special values only, because that avoids accidentally overwriting the macros. That's happened a few times. I mean, it's very sad when it does, because we don't have any ability to go back in and fix them after the fact. If the macros of the file gets corrupted, the only solution is to ask you to download a clean version of the FAT and re-enter 12 data tabs worth of data. So we're hoping that with these cautions, that doesn't happen to anyone this year. Because it's a much larger data tool, it's not due until October 27th. So 2+ months from now, it is available on the OneHub site, ready to download. Should be completed based on your most recently completed fiscal year. As we have since the start of benchmarking, we asked JCCs to exclude from their financial accounting tool data any out of scope, any unusual programs that we typically wouldn't see at a JCC. This was a huge issue for a lot of the New York City metro JCCs that have huge government contracts. They're providing vocational services and counseling programs and all kinds of things that most JCCs are not providing. So we're not worried about, your older adult program or the work you do with for people with disabilities. That's really normative. Most JCCs are doing things in those areas. We're talking about something that's really unusual for a JCC. And if you have something you think may fit in that category, and you wanna run it by us, please do. We'll be glad to think it through together. If not, and for most JCCs, there isn't out of scope. You'll just complete the financial accounting tool, providing your revenues and expenses, and following our, I think probably the biggest pain, following our defined categories of revenues and expenses. I mentioned earlier that even though you're seasoned and you're in many cases the finance staff who are completing this are not doing it for the first time, it's worth reading through the instructions before beginning the FAT. And in the case of the FAT, we're talking about a lot of directions. So we define all of the departments. We also define the administrative areas. So the JCCs are hopefully being consistent in how they're reporting data in the financial accounting tool. It starts with tab Z, where all we want completed initially are those first three cells circled at the top. Selecting your JCC using the drop-down menu, telling us when your fiscal year ends, and whether this is part of a multi-site JCC submission. That's all you'll do at the beginning, because the rest of this tab is designed to reconcile all the rest of the data that will be captured and uploaded to this tab to your audited figures. So the row 16, these three orange cells will automatically update as you fill data into the other data tabs. And then you'll add in your depreciation, gains and losses, and any other changes to get back to the audited figures. So that's the first tab. That's tab Z. The membership tab, just a reminder that when we ask about whether you are a single tier or two-tier membership, our definition is all about fitness. If a member has access to your fitness center as part of their membership, you're single tier. If fitness is an add-on, it's an additional level of membership for your JCC, then you're a two-tier. And if you select two-tier, you'll see that a couple other cells pop open so that we have the detail to be able to allocate the additional fitness charges to the fitness department and allocate the non-fitness membership to the non-fitness departments. So that's the membership tab. And then we have two tabs, a tab on revenues and a tab on expenses. They are designed the same. The rows are your programmatic departments, with the first row being unallocable to departments. We always want JCCs to push revenues and expenses into program areas wherever it makes sense. So if you have a grant that's for preschool, please put it in the preschool line. If day camp does a special fundraiser, put that in the day camp line. Obviously, the direct program tuitions, that's easy, that's intuitive. And if there are things that don't apply anywhere, if you've got a federation allocation that's just general support for the agency, or you do a general fundraiser, Friends of the JCC, you'll use this top line, the unallocable. So that's the revenue tab. The next tab is designed exactly the same. The rows are all identical. The columns are a series of broad expense categories. But the one important reminder is we want you to report maintenance, housekeeping, repair, and utility expenses on the next tab, not on this tab. Reminder, the reason we do that is we will allocate occupancy expense and we'll allocate administrative overhead across your program departments. We want to do that using the same methodology for every JCC. So we collect those data separately and we do the spreading. So this is all your expenses except, as I said, maintenance, housekeeping, repairs, and utility, which we capture on this tab. Again, in broad buckets, we don't need a lot of detail. The first couple cells are about offsite. If you have an offsite preschool, an offsite day camp, an offsite conference center, you put those expenses here on the top. And then just a few data categories for your on-site expenses. And here's probably the first part in the financial accounting tool where we do need you to guess, right? We in general don't want benchmarking JCCs to guess about data. But when we ask you to tell us how your labor, your maintenance and housekeeping labor's time is allocated, is spent across different departments. We're not expecting any JCC to have time sheets or any other scientific approach for doing that. We expect you to make your best guesses about what those allocations should be during the summer months and during the non-summer months. And our only requirement is they need to add to 100%. They add to 100%, we'll leave to your judgment what those percentages should be. We do the same thing with administrative time. You'll recall that we want to be able to we want you to be able to report how your executive director spends his or her time, finance staff, marketing staff, membership, fundraising staff. And so we provided on OneHub this form if you want to actually distribute it to individual staff and say, give me your estimates for how you spent your time across these different categories during the non-summer or summer months. I recognize, however, that many JCCs decided that's just too labor intensive. And so it may be a department head that's completing that, or maybe the senior management team that develops those estimates, or maybe the finance department does a first draft, and there are a few people who review that afterwards. So this is for all of your administrative staff. The data winds up getting entered on tab C. A reminder, each column in tab C is either a specific person, like CEO, or a specific kind of role. So you can combine all of your front desk staff in a single column. We don't need the details of the 8 different people who work at your front desk. We need the total that they combined. They represent 4.6 FTEs of staff, and their combined salary is whatever it is. And overall, this is how the front desk staff tends to spend its time. That's plenty enough detail. Don't kill yourself trying to give us person by person by person for those kinds of roles. But important, just as we on the space, on the labor said, it's got to add up to 100%. Every column needs to allocate 100% of time during the non-summer and summer months. And this cell that I've circled here at the top needs to get to 0, because what it's doing is it's comparing total unallocable staff salaries from the expense tab to prior to the salary data that you're entering as you complete this form. So you'll do the first column, and it will do a comparison. It'll say, okay, you've got $143,000 of salary left to allocate, and then you'll add your second person and your third person. That number will keep getting smaller. When you're done, it needs to be 0, because we need to make sure that you've given us allocations, time allocations for all the people represented in that unallocable staff salaries. So I'm emphasizing that here. We've added it as a new validation check at the end, and I promise you that if it doesn't come to 0, it'll be part of our validation process. We'll come back and we'll say something's wrong here, something's missing, they're not tying. Few more tabs that I want to look at, and then we will close the call. Interior space. You'll remember that we've identified some kinds of program space that most JCCs or many JCCs have, and then we provide a number of optional columns for you to add anything that's missing. Austin will need to start from scratch because they've done such a huge capital campaign and renovations since 2021. The rest of you will largely be able to look at your last FAT square footage data to fill out the top of the form. And then you'll need to to reevaluate how those spaces are spent across both programmatic departments and unallocable. Again, getting to 100% for each of those rooms. So that's the interior space. Again, you'll start by saying we've got X thousand square foot of program space, excluding bathrooms, excluding hallways, those sorts of things. And this orange tab will monitor your input as you complete this form, and it'll get to 0 when you've allocated all of your square footage. Couple questions about exterior space, so we can allocate snow plowing and lawn cutting. And the last data entry tab is the balance sheet. We're collecting some quarterly asset and liability balances, and then a handful of year-end data points for unrestricted and restricted assets and liabilities. That's the balance sheet. I always forget this tab. My apologies. So yes, a few additional questions about major renovations, and a few questions about operations, how many full-time staff were in place, whether you have a Jewish educator as part of your staff, whether there were involuntary staff terminations during the year. So just a handful of questions. This used to be much longer, and we found that we and you weren't using the results, so we've tried to limit it to the most important questions. And then we get to the validation tab. Unlike the participation tool, you can see that there are lots of things we're checking in the FAT. And this is the top half of the tab. There's another set of validations on the bottom. Just to help you get behind what we're looking at. This first table is simply looking for, in any department where you've reported revenues, have you also reported expenses? That's all it's looking at. So in this example, early childhood has a yes in the row because there are revenues and expenses. That's typically what we would see for a program area in a JCC. The next row, summer day camp, says no, because the data said that there was revenue and no expenses. That's really unusual. It's hard to think of a case where a JCC had revenues coming in and wasn't spending any of that revenue on the program area. The last possible outcome, where it says ask, is the opposite, where there are expenses but no revenues. And while that's rare, there have been occasions where a JCC feels like providing a certain service is a critical mission, part of their mission, something that they want to do for the community, but they don't charge. They don't charge anything to provide that service. So asked is really just double check. Does that look right? In many cases, what we've discovered is someone just entered a number on the wrong row, right? They meant to put something in the after-school program. They accidentally put a single number or multiple numbers in the young adult program. And so we wound up with an ask or a no here for young adults. The reason when they went back and looked at the revenues tab and the expense tab was something got entered on the wrong program row. The second tab, and I am almost finished. Thank you for your patience. It's looking at those allocations. Typically, a JCC isn't going to allocate MRHU labor or administrative time or space to a program that doesn't have revenues and expenses. I honestly can't think of a situation where that would fall. So again, if you see no's popping up, it's because in most cases there's been an allocation number. You put 3% down for the rec department, but you actually don't track revenues and expenses for recreation, and it should have gone in the fitness row. So that's why there was a mismatch. And there are a few additional checks on the bottom of the page around labor, total salary and fringes, around allocation of locker room space to major programs that typically use locker rooms, and a couple checks to make sure that those allocations add to 100% and tie back, ending with those sign-offs. So I went through that very quickly. Because I think you've seen this before, and there were very few changes in the financial accounting tool. The biggest change was dropping the pandemic guidance and dropping the special government relief tab that we added to help JCC's account for the special funding that was available in 21 and 22. So went quickly because you've seen it before, and because the questions will come when you start completing the form. I didn't want to belabor any of those specific tabs or questions on this call, but I'm confident that you or your colleagues will raise questions as you pop into them. Really, just for Johanna, who isn't seeing this for the first time, a reminder that there's an extra tool that multi-site JCCs need to complete, that they'll complete 2 participation tools and 2 financial accounting tools. And there actually is a set of detailed directions in the additional multi-site folder on OneHub to guide the process for those JCCs. The presentation ends with this calendar. It's just to give you in a sort of snapshot the whole process from today, from this orientation through to next spring, when we're doing those consultations with your JCCs, includes the deadlines, the major chunks of work that are happening at each phase. So that's a good reference for you as well. I think I've covered all of this, so I'm going to skip the checklist and end by introducing you or reintroducing you to the benchmarking team. You may be hearing from Bryden Hayden, Paul Ellebrecht, Natalie Hilfiger-Roberts over the course of the next couple of months. They help with the tool validation. They are my backup in responding to questions that are sent to the JCC benchmark email address. Just wanted you to have seen their names ahead of time, so you weren't surprised at who they were and what they were throwing at you. So let me stop sharing and see if there are any questions that I can help you with at this point.
Is it possible to send that calendar overview as its own PDF document?
Well, this presentation is in OneHub as a PDF. You'd like me to pull it out?
I mean, I can print it individually, it just streamlines it for us, but we're keeping track and pacing where we need to be at with certain deadlines. It's easy just to have that printed out on our desk, but maybe just speaking for myself.
Not hard to do, so I'm glad to send that to you, Ronnie.
Thank you very much, Andy. And I may have not heard this, but when did you say we're going to be receiving our final member dates?
As long as JCCs give me their preferences this week, we're going to finalize those dates next week.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. Well, I actually blew my ending early record, so I apologize for being verbose. Thank you all so very much for the time today and for the time that I know is forthcoming. Please let me know if I can be helpful at any point.
Thank you. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank
Andy.
you so much.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.